Nora Ephron is the godmother of romantic comedies. She gave new life to the romantic comedy genre by focusing on the female perspective, highlighting that women do not need to change themselves entirely in order to find love. She was a pioneer for and mentor to many female directors and writers over the course of her life and paved the way for many female voices. She influenced not only a genre, but the entire film industry with her films and her perspective. I chose to focus on Ephron because I love romantic comedies and stories about true love. When Harry Met Sally is one of my favorite films of all time. It is not only a love story to falling in love in New York, but a love story to love stories themselves. I don't know if I relate to this film because I am so picky in love, or if I am so picky in love because I love this film. But either way, I am a total Sally. Nora Ephron was the eldest of 4 daughters, born to Henry and Phoebe Ephron, noted playwrights and screenwriters. Growing up, Ephron's mother often repeated the mantra, "Everything is copy," a dogma that heavily influenced Ephron's writing, and from which she drew infinite inspiration all her life. Ephron graduated from Wellesley College in 1962 and moved to New York to become a journalist. She was hired as a mail girl at Newsweek, but quickly became a reporter for the New York Post. In the late 1960s, Ephron began an editorial career, writing mostly for Esquire and The New Yorker throughout the 1970s. During her second marriage to Carl Bernstein, she became involved in the rewriting of the film All the President's Men, and even though the rewrite never came to fruition, it started her career in screenwriting. In 1980, she divorced Bernstein and, true to her mother's advice, turned the scandal into copy by penning the novel and eventual film Heartburn. Before the acclaimed Heartburn, her first screenplay, co-written with Alice Arlen, was for Silkwood, a 1983 film based on the life of Karen Silkwood, the nuclear whistleblower and labor union activist, for which Ephron received the first of her 3 eventual Oscar nominations for Best Screenplay. The other 2 were for When Harry Met Sally, which truly began her meteoric rise in film, and Sleepless in Seattle. She not only wrote, but also directed many of her later films, including Sleepless in Seattle, You've Got Mail, Bewitched, and Julie and Julia. Over the course of her life, Ephron published several essay collections, including I Feel Bad About My Neck and Other Thoughts on Being a Woman, and I Remember Nothing, which were both bestsellers. She wrote the play Imaginary Friends and co-wrote the play Love, Loss, and What I Wore with her sister Delia. In 2012, she was still working tirelessly when she succumbed to pneumonia as a complication of leukemia and passed away at the relatively young age of 71. She left behind an incredible legacy that will be the focus of this presentation. One theme present in Ephron's work is delayed happy endings. The characters may go through trials and tribulations, but in the end, they emerge blissfully happy with their choices. This can be seen in all of her more traditional romantic comedies, in which the romantic leads end up together, and can also be seen in her more dramatic films, including Heartburn, in which the pregnant female protagonist decides to leave her philandering husband. At the end of the film, she's glad to be going back to New York and starting her life anew, without her dud of a husband. These happy endings may be considered trite by some, but they endear the audience to Ephron and make us believe in true happiness and bliss. In most of her films, Ephron highlights resilience and determination in the face of defeat. One of When Harry Met Sally's best scenes, although there are quite a few, comes after Harry and Sally have already tried a relationship and decided it won't work out. Harry delivers a grand speech to Sally, telling her that he loves her and had to run to tell her immediately because when you realize you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. Although they had initially split up, Harry never gave up hope and eventually won Sally's heart back. In Julie and Julia, Julia Child is determined to learn French cooking and write a cookbook about it for American housewives. Although her novel is initially rejected, she is resilient in the face of rejection, and her cookbook is eventually published. Ephron instills in all of us the idea that determination will get you far in life, and even if you are not victorious in love, as is the case in Heartburn, resilience will get you through your toughest moments. In an article for Salon, Andrew O'Heher aptly notes that Ephron realizes that the romantic comedy genre requires a little bite, which Ephron supplies through the threat of emotional vitriol not far below the surface. In When Harry Met Sally, Sally's last words to Harry are, "I hate you, Harry. I really hate you," right before they kiss and make up. In You've Got Mail, Kathleen and Joe originally see each other as enemies and rivals in business, only to eventually anonymously fall in love over email. Despite the initial hatred, when the two finally reveal who they are to each other, Kathleen cries, "I wanted it to be you. I wanted it to be you so badly." This initial animosity can be found in many of Ephron's films, and what would the romantic comedy genre be without two people who love to hate each other growing into two people who love each other? A large part of Ephron's work involves couples who are meant for each other but do not necessarily realize it. This, of course, comes with the territory of writing a romantic comedy. However, part of what makes Ephron's portrayal of these characters so interesting is not only that they are wrong for each other, but the way in which she exhibits just how wrong they are, through the distinct social neuroses of these mildly dysfunctional people, as BFI's Hannah McGill so deftly observes. In When Harry Met Sally, Sally admits to just wanting it the way she wants it, which is evident in the extremely idiosyncratic way in which she orders food, something Harry initially despises but eventually grows to love. Jade Bukowski notes how, in this way, Ephron opens our hearts to unconventional setups and everyday connections that just might change our lives. Who would believe that a widowed architect in Seattle and a reporter from Maryland could fall in love over the radio and meet on top of the Empire State Building on Valentine's Day? Who would think that a pompous actor and a literal witch could fall in love? Or that a ruthless bookstore magnate and an independent bookstore owner could fall in love over email? Nora Ephron could believe it, and make us believe that true love is anywhere and everywhere, especially in the places we least expect it. Nora Ephron is often credited with having a lasting influence on the romantic comedy genre as we know it today. She single-handedly reinvented the genre. What is most distinctive about Ephron's work, according to Richard Rustin, is that she placed the burden of narrative development fairly and squarely on the shoulders of her female protagonists. In Ephron's most successful films, including You've Got Mail, Heartburn, Julie and Julia, and Sleepless in Seattle, the women are never asked to change themselves or settle for less in order to get the man. A remarkable change from the romantic comedy films of the decades before, in which the male lead was the embodiment of perfection and the female fell for him, hook, line, and sinker. Ephron's female protagonists have more reservation about their potential matches, as shown in Heartburn, when Rachel delays her wedding for hours, debating whether to go through with it or not. Ephron's leading ladies never compromise who they are. Even though Julia Child is an unconventional woman for her time, she sticks true to herself, and her husband loves her because of it. In fact, Ephron's male leads are the ones who need to undergo changes to win the girl. In You've Got Mail, Joe learns to be more compassionate. In Heartburn, Mark has to give up his philandering ways, at least for a while. And in When Harry Met Sally, Harry has to overcome his pride and ego. With Ephron at the helm of directing and scriptwriting these films, the romantic comedy genre evolved to include women's perspectives and highlight that women can have it all. No changes required. Ephron's lasting influence can also be seen in how her films help to define modern romance and crystallize American sitcoms' obsession with will they, won't they, male-female friendships that continues to this day. In When Harry Met Sally, Harry pontificates often on his theory that single men and women cannot be friends without ending up together. Thus begins Harry and Sally's years-long fight over if he is correct and if they will eventually end up together. And at the end of the movie, of course, they will. Friends, How I Met Your Mother, New Girl, The Big Bang Theory, and even the romance on Gilmore Girls all owe a debt to Nora Ephron and her popularization of the will they, won't they phenomenon. Nora Ephron has also influenced the film industry by mentoring young women of promise, including Lena Dunham. Her involvement with Dunham's work is not surprising, given the fact that Ephron forged an attitude of confessional intimacy that influenced a generation of female comics, according to Hannah McGill. These confessions are most prominent in her books including I Feel Bad About My Neck and Crazy Salad and Scribble Scribble, which includes 2 short essays entitled A Few Words About Breasts and The New Porn. Not only did she personally mentor budding female writers, she also paved the way for women in a traditionally male-dominated industry. However, the way she did this, as Andrew O'Heher points out, was by challenging the entrenched boys' club by making successful movies, rather than waging a war of rhetoric. Ephron led by example, and simply by the virtue of being a successful female screenwriter and director, she paved the way for many women behind her, including Dunham, who acknowledged Ephron in her memoir. One of the main criticisms of Ephron's work is that they often shut out many of life's inconveniences, as Hannah McGill puts it. Some of her films are guilty of making large leaps in logic. For example, is the audience really supposed to believe that Kathleen isn't the tiniest bit angry at Joe for waiting a very long time to reveal that he is in fact the one she has been chatting with online? Ephron films do require some suspending of disbelief, as is the case in Sleepless in Seattle, when Annie tells her fiancé simply, "I can't do this," after they have practically settled every detail of the wedding, to which her fiancé coolly responds, "I don't want to be with someone that anyone settles for. Marriage is hard enough without bringing such low expectations into it." Annie is breaking off their engagement, and her fiancé is reasonable, collected, and at peace with this. I don't think that's how most people would react, but this isn't real life. It's a Nora Ephron film, where breaking up with someone is easy and painless. In You've Got Mail, Kathleen and Frank amicably agree that they both don't love each other anymore, and end up laughing over it. For her part, Ephron admits on the DVD commentary of this film that it's very rare that this happens, that people break up with one another, and it's such a relief, but we all like to think it's possible. Ephron herself would admit that her films are not entirely realistic, but sometimes people don't want realism. They want love and magic. Another criticism about Ephron's films is that they tend to be sappy and naive. Hollywood films became considerably grittier in the 1970s, and Ephron's films must have seemed like a return to the naive illusions of childhood, as Richard Rushton puts it. In fact, in When Harry Met Sally, Harry has much of the same neuroses that Woody Allen's character has in the 1977 film Annie Hall. However, unlike in a Woody Allen film, Harry makes a courageous and impassioned plea to Sally at the end of the movie, which certainly would have mopped up viewers for whom Woody Allen's worldview remained a tad too cynical, posits Hannah McGill. Ephron is very self-aware of the fact that her films can be seen as specious or factitious, but maintains that they are what people want and indeed need to believe in. True love, overcoming all odds. Ariel Levy gets it right when she says that the rap on Ephron from her detractors has always been that her cinematic vision is too schmaltzy, too eager to soothe and please. The urge to put a happy ending on every story is what her critics dislike and her fans depend upon. The romantic comedy genre certainly has its moments of mawkishness. Even within a single movie, writes Matt Weinstock in the Paris Review, there are moments of rapturous sublimity and moments you feel like crossing the street to avoid. Her films are not perfect, and often do not capture the intricacies of real life and real relationships. But if it was real life, it wouldn't be a romantic comedy, and it wouldn't be a Nora Ephron classic. Nora Ephron was able to breathe new life into the romantic comedy genre because of her female perspective. Her gender influenced every aspect of her filmmaking. In a 1996 graduation speech to Wellesley students, she encouraged women to be the heroine of their own stories, not the victim, adding that it will not be anything like what you think it will be like. But don't be frightened, you can always change your mind. I know, I've had 4 careers and 3 husbands. Ephron highlights this idea in her autobiographical novel and film, Heartburn. Her husband cheated on her while she was 7 months pregnant, and she decided to leave him and start her life over, proving that you can always be the heroine, not the victim. Ephron's centering of female characters and their desires deserves to be acknowledged, especially, as Richard Ruston points out, in the context of other romantic comedy films of the time period. Pretty Woman Saved from Destitution by a Millionaire Cinderella Story, or Groundhog Day's time loop love story, are both very much focused around male characters and how the women they love are able to fit perfectly into their lives. Ephron's films stand out starkly in comparison to these male-written, male-directed, and male-centered love stories. Ephron should be acclaimed for creating real, true-to-life women in her films. Andrew O'Heher claims that she brought romantic comedy into the era of feminism without challenging its fundamental assumptions about men and women and what they want. Ephron didn't need to change the essential ideas about who men and women are to be radical. She simply needed to showcase that women are more than just marriage-obsessed bridezillas. They have other desires and wants besides getting married. Her female characters discuss previously taboo topics like politics, religion, and sex. These women have real opinions and are recognizably human, not the angelic ingenues like those portrayed by Audrey Hepburn. The LA Times posits that Ephron's movies took interesting, complicated, difficult women and treated them like they were subjects worthy of having movies made about them. Her success in the film industry proved to Hollywood that stories about real women are not only viable, but lucrative, paving the way for women and stories about women in the industry today. You cannot think of the romantic comedy genre without thinking of Nora Ephron. While she was a journalist, bestseller, and prodigious playwright over the course of her career, her greatest achievement may be the way in which she changed perspectives about women and movies focused around women in the film industry. She was a pioneer in a male-dominated field. She advanced the credibility of women in the film industry, not by explicitly fighting for women's rights, but simply by proving that women are indeed capable of making witty, delightful, profitable films about women. These ideas remain revolutionary, and she continues to be an icon for women in film.